Hello everyone, and welcome to another installment of the Sketchbook Tour series. This is Alrav from Quebec, Canada, the author and creator of Alcatraz the Protector / Alcatraz the Protector. For all my comic book related stuff out there, you can check it out on my Substack. The links are available in the description below or on my channel's page. And without further ado, let's get right into the next installment. So again, I simply talked while showing off my various sketchbooks, which contains my various practice material that I've made throughout the years and stuff. So you can see some of the... I usually use these type of books to showcase my art, but also to practice and experiment, so I can then make a comic book page for my own creator own stuff. So last time I talked about what made me become a comic book creator, and largely it was because I was a huge Spider-Man Marvel fan when I was a kid, so that's what got me into American comic books especially. So that was part of my root in my childhood, and my interest then became dormant during my teenager phase, and then it came back in adulthood. So between the childhood phase and the adulthood, I've been stuck in this dark age of gaming phase, which is exactly what I'm going to be talking about today. So for those of you who are wondering, I did talk about it previously in my biggest influence video about my personal history with video games, and to put it short and sweet, I used to play and enjoy video games, and there were multiple phases beyond that. So when I was a kid, I sort of played and enjoyed video games, but my interest in them was relatively limited. It was strictly based either on comic book video games, licensed properties and such, or a few select classics from my childhood, which I kind of enjoy. So for instance, you can't really go wrong with old school Nintendo games and such. But it really was until the dawn of my high school days that I became a full-blown gamer, and at this point I'd actually ditched all my creative and artistic pursuit in favor of being a full-blown gamer, which in retrospective was a mistake, and there was a bunch of reasons for that, simply because at the time I simply didn't have the confidence or the discipline to maintain the drawing habit. It also didn't help that I took some art class briefly, and being the only guy among a bunch of other girls was quite an experience. So when I entered high school, I sort of started from scratch, and basically I sort of ditched my artistic pursuit entirely, so to be a full-blown gamer, and a large part of that was due to the type of crowds that I found myself hanging with, so that's my fault. But there's also the type of environment that I was in which I had no control over. So maybe one day I'll share the whole story in a book or something like that. But needless to say that by the time I began high school and the time I ended it, I spent not a single day or moment drawing anything. So all my creativity was dormant for a while, and it wasn't until the beginning of adulthood that I found myself alone by myself for the first time in a long time, and that's when my creative gift sort of came back to the surface, and they sort of became a part of me. So by the time I began Cégep, which, to give you some context, It's the French-Canadian equivalent of college in the United States and other places. So that's kind of when I sort of reconnected with my true self. But it was a premature awakening, and I still wasn't quite experienced as of yet. So I made another mistake, and that was a short relapse period into video game. And this time it was a group of Nintendo metalheads of sort that I found myself hanging with, and so I've got sucked into more video games as a result of that. Needless to say, it was a mistake in perspective to have done so, and let's just say that it was the worst time to be a Nintendo fan. So especially because the system of choice for the group was the Wii U, and it was the worst time to be a Nintendo fan at the time because of that. But luckily it was a short-lived affair, and much like the Wii U itself, so by the end of it I ditched my own Wii U and that was sort of the beginning of the end of my affiliation with this particular group. And after that I've simply drifted out of gaming entirely, with the exception of a few pre-owned copies here and there. So since then, the last time I purchased any video games, to give you an idea, was in early 2017, and the game I bought back then were some old pre-owned games that were on clearance at eBay Games, which, for those of you who don't know, was the equivalent of GameStop in my home place, except that they did rename the name after the original US brand. So that's one thing to clarify. If it were any brand new fully priced game, it will be further back. I think it was in 2014. So technically that would make me a former gamer, someone who used to play and enjoy video games, but has since drifted off in favor of greener pasture. So now my hobbies have changed completely. Now if I'm not doing comics and stuff, I tend to be someone who enjoys books. So these are my main two. And after that, well, there are times and occasions where I don't mind playing some old school retro games, but I've since drifted a lot. So I sort of came back full circle to how I was back when I was a kid. So the moral of the story, if there is one, is choose your crowd wisely, and make sure to keep a space for your real inner self, because if you don't, if you bury what your true authentic self wants to make, you're going to end up punishing yourself sooner or later. When I look back at my time with a video game, I see it as a mixed bag of sorts. On one end, some of the games that I played back then did end up providing me some of the inspiration behind my own comic book work, which you can now read on my Substack. So there are some good things that came out of it. However, there is a part of me who wish that I'd spent more time focusing on my art and my writing rather than trying to play every video games out there, and that's sort of the message that I want to make out there. So there's nothing wrong with video games per se, but when I look back at the time that I spent playing these things, sometimes less is more, and I think this is what I learned from all my experience with video games and such. So I do plan to talk a little bit more about some of the particular games that I played throughout these sketchbook tours of mine, so you can stay tuned for that. With that being said, thanks for watching, and we'll see one another very soon, and enjoy the reading.